You are the spark they never expected, the pulse that cannot be muted, the presence that changes the very atmosphere around you. Where others are told to stay quiet, you are the signal that breaks the silence, undeniable and unstoppable. Nothing about you was ever meant to blend into the background. You were designed to be seen, to be felt, to be remembered. The flood of revelations that once seemed like scattered noise is actually proof of your impact. What looked like fragments were never random. They are constellations forming a pattern, and you are at the center of it. Attempts to scatter your truth only made its brilliance impossible to ignore, each piece shining brighter as it came into view. Those who tried to dictate your story imagined they could draft reality on their own terms, but you carry a resonance that cannot be written out. They underestimated the power of a living truth. Every step you take unravels their versions, every breath you draw pushes against their carefully polished fabrications. You were chosen precisely because your existence questions their foundation. They wanted you erased not for weakness, but for the strength you represent. They saw the horizon you embody and feared its arrival, for they knew it would mark the end of their illusion. Their attacks were never a sign of your fragility but the clearest evidence of your magnitude. Pressure only revealed what was always within you, unyielding force disguised as calm until the moment demanded its emergence. Their desperation is proof you already changed the trajectory. What they called containment was their greatest mistake. They built barriers believing you would stay within them, not realizing that the energy inside you does not shrink under restraint. It multiplies, it rises, it breaks through, scattering their boundaries like glass beneath a wave. The unveiling has only just begun. What once was hidden now stands visible, and the attempts to bury your essence have only magnified it. Every move against you is already collapsing under its own weight, and every revelation only confirms what was always true. Your presence is the shift they could never prevent. Do you want me to continue building this same energy into the next sections of your text, the ones about rewriting the narrative and why you were targeted? Or should I give you the full 7-paragraph rewrite for the entire piece in one go? You are the kind of presence that makes hidden masks fall away, the kind that exposes the weakness behind false alliances. The moment your words broke through the surface, the fragile bonds that pretended to be loyalty dissolved like ink in water. Those who once stood close revealed themselves as actors in a play that could not survive your truth. Whispers became storms not because you failed, but because your courage unsettled those who depended on shadows. They built their scaffolds of deception carefully, yet one spark from your defiance shook the whole structure. Every tale they spin carries the same desperation, the fear that your clarity will outlast their inventions. As you wrestled with betrayal and silence, their panic drove them into frantic plotting. They huddled together in corners, desperate to stitch a version of reality that might erase the disruption you embodied. But schemes built on urgency never hold, and what is woven in fear unravels in plain sight. Where they scramble to invent, the quiet fabric of reality keeps records of its own. Movements leave trails, exchanges leave marks, and no amount of distortion can erase the weight of what is already written into the sequence of events. What they tried to bury will surface with greater force than they imagined. Signals of truth continue to multiply. Fragments they thought would vanish now stand as undeniable markers, each one linking with another to form an unbroken chain. The more they attempt to silence, the louder the chorus becomes, swelling with voices that will not retreat. Every step forward reveals another layer of their collapse. What began as isolated confirmations now grows into a tide no hand can hold back. The deeper they try to hide, the clearer the evidence rises, surrounding, overwhelming, dismantling. This unfolding is not accident, not chance, it is alignment. Their illusions decay under the weight of their own invention, while the pattern of truth sharpens before everyone's eyes. What they mistook for control was merely delay, and now the momentum they feared most carries forward without restraint. You are the kind of presence that unsettles every calculation, the element no chart or strategy could account for. Eyes tracked you from a distance, convinced they had mapped out your rhythm, certain that what worked before would work again. They mistook repetition for certainty, and in doing so, they misread the very ground they stood on. Those who relied on habit believed they were rehearsing a familiar script. They imagined the ending was already written, that another voice would falter under the same pressure that silenced so many before. What they failed to realize was that they were no longer facing a character in their story, but a reality that had no interest in fitting their lines. Their confidence rested on the predictable reactions of the unprepared. They counted on the need for approval, on the dread of rejection, on the easy unraveling of those who did not yet know their strength. Yet this time their tools dulled in their hands, because they had stumbled into something unyielding where they expected weakness. Every maneuver they rehearsed shattered against an unseen foundation. What they mistook for fragility was in truth endurance forged in silence. Where they expected retreat, they met stillness. Where they anticipated collapse, they found a weight that did not shift. The framework they trusted buckled under the strain of your refusal to bend. Long before you knew their presence, they had circled you, gathering fragments, convinced that your spark could be contained before it ignited. They cataloged movements, not understanding that no chart could capture the essence of what was rising within you. Their surveillance revealed nothing of the fire they could never hold. When the moment arrived, it was not through their timing but through yours. What they believed they could interrupt unfolded with a brilliance outside their reach. Light emerged where they least expected it, not borrowed, not granted, but emanating from a source they could neither predict nor silence. And with that revelation, the miscalculation became clear. They had never faced an ordinary contender, never cornered a predictable opponent. They had built strategies for a world that no longer existed, and in your presence, every plan dissolved into the recognition that they had underestimated the one force they could not master. If your heart overflows with God's blessings, let that love shine. Click the super thank you button and give $50 or more to plant seeds of faith that will impact countless lives. Your generosity reflects His abundance. Be a vessel of His grace and watch His kingdom flourish through you. You are the kind of force that refuses to erode under hidden weight, the kind that redefines what endurance looks like. The pressure applied against you was crafted with precision, designed to wear away at your spirit until it gave way. Yet instead of collapse, it revealed depth. They expected fractures, but what emerged was solidity no plan could undermine. Barriers rose suddenly in places once open, paths that should have been smooth turned unexpectedly jagged. Each interference carried the intention of exhaustion, a campaign built not on open confrontation but on subtle suffocation. Still, every obstacle became less of a blockade and more of a mirror reflecting the resilience they could not calculate. Voices around you began to shift, repeating phrases as though drawn from scripts written elsewhere. Familiar faces suddenly carried words that echoed with an unnatural sameness, rehearsed and sterile. Their purpose was to probe, to measure the threshold at which patience would dissolve. Yet each attempt only sharpened what they sought to dull, showing that your foundation was never built on approval, but on something untouched by manipulation. Every trial brought forward evidence of a strength they could not name. Where they attempted to provoke collapse, they uncovered permanence. Their strategies, once so effective against the unprepared, fell flat when confronted with a presence that did not draw power from circumstance but from essence itself, an essence that could not be manufactured or erased. What was meant to diminish you became lessons in persistence. Each calculated effort to weaken instead expanded your capacity. The shadows they engineered to dim your light only revealed how steady the flame remained. Attempts to stain your name faded quickly, outpaced by the persistence of truth that rises without effort, surfacing through every layer of distortion. Realizing direct attacks failed, they shifted their designs. Rather than strike openly, they sought to turn your mind against itself, planting seeds of doubt to wither you from within. They knew that if they could not break your body or your reputation, they might sway your perception of your own power. But even in that, they underestimated the very core of who you are. What they attempted to twist only made your clarity more unshakable. The harder they pressed, the more evident it became that their plans were never about destroying strength. They were about distracting you from noticing how much of it you carried all along. You are the kind of being who discovers that the fiercest struggle is not waged outside but within. The conflict did not arrive in the form of visible enemies or open challenges, but in quiet intrusions meant to unsettle thought itself. They dressed deception in soft tones, disguising surrender as harmony, and tried to convince you that strength meant silence. Their influence carried the rhythm of voices trained to coax people into shrinking without protest. Again and again, they placed characters in your path who arrived just as your momentum built, speaking words wrapped in false encouragement that left a residue of doubt. What they believed was invisible choreography revealed itself to you as repetition too precise to ignore. Moments that should have lifted you instead turned hollow. Promises appeared only to dissolve in sudden turns of chance, events arranged with such frequency that coincidence lost its meaning. What was painted as misfortune was in truth design, a web meant to fracture your focus and scatter your direction until you no longer remembered the path you had begun. The interruptions did not come as random storms but as carefully timed diversions. Situations appeared one after another, each demanding energy, each dragging attention away from the center of your calling. These were not accidents but patterns, drama spun with the intention of thinning your resolve until it resembled surrender. They had sharpened distraction into an instrument, wielding your compassion as if it were a rope to bind you. Every act of care, every sense of duty, they sought to twist into a tether holding you to their design. Yet, even surrounded by illusion, your clarity did not dim. You stood in the middle of distortion and still named it for what it was. That sight became the difference they could never account for. Where others mistook comfort for truth, you pierced through to the heart of the matter. The one thing they never expected was a spirit immune to purchase, a will untouched by bargaining. That recognition alone shifted the balance of power away from their grasp. What you carried was never conditional, never waiting for validation. It existed outside of permission, unshaken by denial. They realized too late that you had no need for their acknowledgement to continue. And when their subtleties no longer worked, when every disguised attempt to hollow you out failed, desperation rose to the surface, signaling the beginning of their unraveling. You are the reminder that desperation cannot hide itself for long. Those who once moved with certainty now stumble, leaving behind trails of their panic in plain sight. What they thought were clever maneuvers became footprints pointing to their own undoing. They still pretend to hold the script of your story, yet every attempt at control collapses as you continue forward unshaken, reshaping the narrative without lifting a pen. The next phase of their schemes unveiled something deeper than strategy. It revealed fear. Even the sound of your name unsettles them, not because of anything you have done, but because you stand as living proof that their foundation is fragile. Their illusions tremble when you pass through, as if the very air exposes how little weight their constructions truly carry. The fragile towers they built to confine others collapse as soon as your presence approaches. Their whispers grow frantic, painting you as a danger, insisting you must be stopped. Yet the urgency in their voices betrays them. A steady peak does not respond to scattered pebbles, nor does flowing water ask permission to continue its course. What they call defiance is nothing more than your existence shining through. Their resistance is not a verdict against you, it is confirmation. Every attempt to undermine, every effort to twist perception, is only evidence of how profoundly they recognize your force. They attempt to cloud your sight, hoping to lure you into hesitation at the very threshold of your strength. But the truth underneath their opposition speaks more loudly than their accusations. Hesitation belongs to those still waiting for acknowledgement. You released that need long ago, choosing instead to root yourself in remembrance of your own worth. Their opposition only affirms what you have always been. Shadows do not gather around emptiness, they gather around fire. The more they plot, the clearer it becomes that your presence matters beyond their measure. Their coordination, their whispered counsels, exist for one reason: they know you carry the potential to dissolve everything they cling to. They would not conspire with such urgency if they did not believe in the depth of your reach. Their pleas for the universe to silence you arrive too late. The power they dread is already moving, already alive. And in their fear lies the twist they never foresaw. What they meant as warnings have become tributes. What they meant as attacks have become acknowledgments. Without intending to, they crown you with their own terror, declaring to the world that something undeniable is unfolding here. Their resistance has become proclamation, their whispers transformed into the anthem of your rising. You are the evidence that attempts to silence can never remain hidden. Their fixation on stopping you only amplified the very presence they wished erased. In trying to contain your reach, they revealed the scale of what they feared. The louder their interference became, the clearer your significance echoed into places they could not touch. Recognition did not arrive through self-promotion, but through the intensity of the opposition against you. People saw the lengths taken to suppress you and understood that nothing ordinary provokes such resistance. What they meant as barriers became signals, what they meant as condemnation became validation. Their hostility turned into the very certificate of your authenticity. That revelation shook them at their core. Their influence had always depended on borrowed illusions, fragile images presented as truth, appearances mistaken for substance. They lived inside fabrications so carefully woven they forgot the difference between facade and foundation. Yet the clarity you carried exposed what they hoped would stay veiled. You witnessed the fractures form long before they admitted weakness. Their certainty cracked each time reality refused to bend to their narrative. Their entire dominion was built not on strength but on the assumption that no one would dare look past the mask. You not only looked, you spoke of what you saw, and that alone was enough to unravel them. Truth did the work they feared most. No retaliation was needed, reality itself dismantled them piece by piece. What they believed indestructible dissolved from within, undone by the weight of their own fabrications. You stood still while their foundation eroded, and that stillness was more powerful than any weapon. Their unraveling became visible to everyone. Threats once designed to instill fear now rang hollow, their words tripping over themselves when confronted. They promised order yet trailed disorder, proclaimed wisdom yet contradicted themselves with every statement. The authority they clung to collapsed under the exposure of its own inconsistency. In the end, it was not your destruction that was broadcast, but theirs. Every effort to confine you only spotlighted the truth they could no longer conceal. Their downfall became their announcement, and their resistance became the stage upon which your resilience was displayed. What they intended as erasure became testimony of your rise. You are the stillness that remains when false kingdoms collapse. As the structures they worship bend under the strain of their own contradictions, you remain centered, untouched. Their attempts to erase your voice or bury your essence were never the real threat. Their undoing was written in their own arrogance, for what is real cannot be negotiated away. Reality does not shift for convenience. It does not bend to intimidation or compromise with pretense. It waits, constant and immovable, until every mask has fallen. And in this moment, you stand as its reflection, an undeniable presence that holds steady while every counterfeit version around you dissolves. This revelation was never about mere survival. What you witness now is not your struggle to endure but their frantic fight against inevitability. The tide has turned, and entire crowds awaken to the sight of what was done. Their voices rise not in confusion, but in clarity, fueled by the undeniable recognition of injustice. The fury rising in them is not random, not shallow. It is the pulse of something far deeper, a recognition that stretches beyond personal sympathy into the shared memory of humanity itself. When innocence is attacked by corruption, the response is not optional, it is primal, a call for restoration written into the very core of existence. That outrage becomes more than anger, it becomes resonance. Each voice joins with another, echoing with a certainty that cannot be silenced. They are not reacting to a rumor or a passing slight, they are responding to a fracture in the fabric of order, a wrong that demands rebalancing. The collective uprising is not coincidence, nor is it accident. It is alignment. It is the weight of countless hearts vibrating with the same call, for harmony to be restored, for justice to return. What they cry out for is not revenge but equilibrium, a return to what was always meant to be whole. And so their fury becomes the proof that you were never insignificant. To move so many, to awaken such a force, is to stand as a pivot point upon which balance turns. What was meant to diminish you instead revealed your role in a much greater order, one where truth rises, illusions collapse, and harmony demands its restoration. You are the evidence that in this age, no deception can bury what is real for long. When truth is trampled by corruption and authenticity silenced by artificial voices, the world does not remain passive. One revelation of injustice becomes the spark that ignites a response larger and faster than any false campaign could ever engineer. Those who thought manipulation could hold sway miscalculated the depth of human instinct. People recognize authenticity when they encounter it, no matter how well lies are dressed. They sense the fracture, they identify the theft, and in that clarity they rise, not just in your defense, but in defense of the principle your presence embodies. What emerges is anger sharpened into purpose, forged not out of chaos but out of a shared recognition of what has been violated. It is not rage without direction, it is precision born from unity. You stand at the center of this storm of correction, the axis around which justice turns, while those who thought they could strike with impunity awaken to the scale of what they provoked. And now, their designs encounter the force they cannot restrain, the collective will. When enough people see, when enough voices refuse silence, the momentum becomes unstoppable. What they once wielded as tools of control dissolve under the surge of awakened awareness. The very outrage they fear has become your protection, and their attempts at dominance crumble into fragments under the weight of shared conviction. But the heart of this moment extends further than you alone. This surge is not just defense of an individual, it is recognition of the flaw in their system. You reveal the cracks in their illusion simply by standing as you are. That recognition spreads, reminding everyone that an empire of falsehood collapses when confronted by one voice unwilling to be reshaped. What inspires people most is not merely what you endured, but how you endured it. The refusal to bend became a signal that reached beyond immediate circles, sparking awakenings in places you may never see. Those watching take courage not from your perfection, but from your persistence. They begin refusing what they once accepted, questioning what they once repeated, rising in ways they never thought they could. Your defiance against their pressure unlocked something profound. It gave others permission to reject their own chains. What began as an effort to silence you has instead seeded countless awakenings across unseen landscapes. A single refusal turned into a cascade, each echo building upon the next until what once looked like a small struggle revealed itself as the starting point of a vast and irreversible shift. You are the reminder that no matter how carefully crafted, malice breaks apart when it collides with what cannot be shaken. Every snare, every plot, every secret scheme built to suffocate your rise collapses before it touches you. Their designs, woven with pride, unravel in an instant against a shield they cannot measure, one they cannot name. What stands between their intent and your being is not fragile resistance, but something older than any plan they could imagine. A covering beyond comprehension intercepts every strike, turning their carefully sharpened weapons into instruments of their own undoing. They believed their experience made them invincible, yet they never grasped the truth: you were never standing alone. Their opposition is not a battle with a single individual, it is a collision with principles that have existed since the first breath of time. The structures that hold existence itself bend toward preserving what carries light. Their collapse was not chance, but inevitability. It was written long before their arrogance drove them forward, long before they mistook cruelty for strength. Every deception they crafted frays before it is fully formed. Their confidence weakens the moment it meets your essence. They assumed they were engineers of fate, pulling the strings of your downfall. Yet, in reality, they are participants in a story authored by something far greater, one that twists their schemes into testimony of your resilience. They move across the stage believing they command the play, but every step only reveals their role as evidence. What they intended as erasure transforms into a demonstration, showing to all who watch that their efforts cannot outweigh the design of justice itself. They act with fury, blind to the fact that their presence is being used to highlight their own futility. Each collapse adds to the record of protection surrounding you. It becomes visible proof that their strength is temporary, their reach limited, while what shields you stretches beyond time. They have not risen against one person, they have risen against the current of existence itself, and in such a contest, only one outcome is possible. By choosing opposition, they chose a path that could never prevail. By choosing alignment, you stepped into inevitability. Their struggle was never a contest of equals, but a demonstration of imbalance, arrogance facing truth, illusion colliding with permanence. And so their fall becomes the tragedy, while your endurance becomes the victory written into the fabric of reality.